Hey everybody, it's Monday, December 30th, 2024. Welcome to the NFL Fantasy Football Show presented by Uber Eats. Get game day deals all season long. It's me, your man, MG Marcus Grant, joined by Michael F. Florio and Laquan Jones. And we need a miracle to win a fantasy title this year. Fellas, how are we feeling after week 17? I mean, first off, are you guys, I don't even know. I mean, I know, Florio, you got bounced in a couple. Laquan, are you still fighting for a championship somewhere?
No, we've been put to bed, but going to bed and waking up as a NFC West champion feels a lot better than any fantasy championship, honestly, because the Rams are dangerous again, and I've been screaming this for so long that we're going back to the Super Bowl, guys.
You know what? Here's the thing. In the NFC, you can't really argue it because there's no clear-cut favorite in the conference right now, and the Rams. At first, I was like, well, the Rams are going to win the division because everybody else is falling apart. But the Rams are legitimately playing good football, especially defensively, over the last few weeks. So, yeah, that's pretty good. Meanwhile, your Bills haven't had anything to play for in a few weeks, really, Florio.
Well, yesterday they clinched the 2 seed, and look, I'll argue that clinching the 2 seed before another certain specific player in their team even clinched their division, that's what MVPs do. So that's what I'm going out on.
And then the 49ers. So anyway, we got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about on the show today. We're going to have biggest takeaways from week 17. Plus, we'll give our waiver wire pickups of the year. A guy that probably helped a lot of you to where you are at this point in the season, especially if you are still competing for a championship. Of course, one more game left to be played before a fantasy champion is crowned in a lot of leagues. We got a Monday night game between the Lions and the 49ers. So still a lot of drama, a lot of fantasy relevant guys going tonight that could help a lot of teams one way or another. But let's get started, as we always do about this time, with some fantasy headlines. And headlines today a little bit different because obviously the season pretty much over. So while there are certainly some notable injuries, maybe not as much of an impact for our purposes. So instead, kind of looking ahead, looking back and looking ahead all at the same time. So let's start in Las Vegas with Brock Bowers, who broke a number of records over the weekend, most notably broke Mike Ditka's record for rookie tight end receiving yards, a record that had stood for 63 entire years. On top of it, he also broke Puka Nakua's record for receptions by a rookie, which stood for 1 entire year. But Florio, look, we are in a spot where it looks like for the second consecutive year, a rookie is going to be the tight end 1 overall. Last year, it was Sam Laporta. He was drafted as the top tight end this year. That didn't work out. Are we willing to take the same leap next year with Brock Bowers? Is he your tight end 1, and how early are you drafting him?
Yes, he is my tight end 1. And I think there's a big difference between him and Sam Laporta. And the difference is, last year, as awesome as Sam Laporta was, it was largely propped up by touchdowns. Like, I don't believe he even had 900 yards. Kyle Pitts had more yards as a rookie tight end, which is why in the offseason I was like, I think Kyle Pitts' rookie season was probably more impressive than Sam Laporta's, because touchdowns, as Marcus, as you say all the time, are fickle beasts. And Brock Bowers, with better quarterback play, is going to get a chance at more touchdowns. But the yard numbers, the catch numbers, to me, those are more reliable year over year. And just watching him play, like, he is the best rookie tight end I have ever watched in my life. So, yeah, and for where I would draft him, I want to say the second round. I think that's realistically where you would have to want to take him, but I wouldn't be surprised if people pull him up to be a late first, because tight end premium and shortage at the position and all that.
All right, so if we're going with the premise that he's the tight end 1, Laquan, who is tight end 2? Trey McBride, George Kittle, Travis Kelce? Who's tight end 2 for you then?
Honestly, it probably had to be Trey McBride. His frustrations this season was well displayed out there. And honestly, I had him up there as the tight end 1 for this season following Florio. I mean, we were on the McBride train, but the touchdowns, they just weren't there. And honestly, next season, they have to get this problem fixed in the red zone with him and find a way for him to find the end zone. Of course, he scores on us. I mean, whatever the case may be. But more so, looking at, like, I love what Trey McBride was able to do this season just overall as a receiver. I know we were waiting for Zach Ertz to move out of the way, but this is the season that we kind of had on display for Trey McBride. He just did not find the end zone.
Yeah, and I think a larger conversation needs to be had about Kyler Murray, about the Cardinals offense because Trey McBride didn't have touchdowns. Marvin Harrison Jr. was generally a disappointment for a lot of us. So I think that's a conversation that we need to actually dive into at some point in the offseason.
And Greg Dortch. How'd we forget about Dortch?
And Greg Dortch. You know what? I heard his name over the weekend. I was like, Dortch, man, I forgot about that dude. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley is now over 2,000 rushing yards for the season and very much within reach of Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record. Laquan, is it a foregone conclusion that he's the 1.01 next year?
Ooh, that's a good question, man. And honestly, me personally, or even some of the CMC, fans out there, I probably won't be taking a running back 101. I mean, this dude is on the verge of breaking Eric Dickerson's record, and honestly, I hope he doesn't. I mean, can that stay with a Ram? Come on, guys. But more so, looking at next year, 101, I think a lot of CMC fans will understand, the workload, where CMC was last season and where he's at now. I don't want a guy that's going to be overused, chasing records and stuff like that. I'm honestly good on a running back in the first round. I'd rather take my shots with the wide receivers or even tight end, like Kyle Flory was saying, with Brock Bowers sitting at that back end of the first round, early second round, where he could be going. So I'm pivoting in other options. I love what he's doing this season. A great talent, a great fantasy asset. But 101, I'm shying away from that, probably for good from the running back position.
All right, so Laquan says he's off of running backs in the first round. Let's say you're sitting there, though, at number 4, Florio, and Justin Jefferson's gone. Jamar Chase is gone. I don't know, and you're looking at, say, Saquon Barkley, or you're looking at, say, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Where are you going right now?
I'd probably go Bijan Robinson.
Option C.
Complete pivot. Because if I'm taking a running back, look, Saquon is awesome. He's got way more wear and tear than Bijan does. He's older, a longer history of injuries, and even more than that, I don't believe I believe this is going to be Saquon Barkley's career year. I don't believe we have seen the best out of Bijan Robinson yet. And that is something that I'm trying to change in my process. Is in the past, I've been quick to be like, this guy was amazing last year. He might not live up to that, but he's going to be amazing again. But the truth of the matter is these special seasons, like what Saquon is having or Jamar Chase is having, they win leagues. And I could see, I don't think Saquon is going to do this again next year. I think he'll be great. I think he'll be a top 5 fantasy running back. I don't think he's going to run for over 2,000 yards. So that to me kind of leans maybe. But look, everyone's process is different. So if you want to go Saquon at the 101, I'm not going to fight you over it.
Don't do it.
It feels a lot like, our friend Bob Harris, who always says, don't draft last year's best team. And it sort of feels that way, but also I could easily see myself getting sucked into, all right, so even if he has 1,400 yards next year, that's still good, right? I think both arguments are going to be in play, and I think it's going to be a big thing we're going to debate all offseason long for sure. All right, there you go. Those are our headlines. Time now for Fantasy Heroes, presented by Subway. Taking a look at the top scores in Week 17, with still one more game left to be played. But Joe Burrow, that huge game on Saturday night, having overtime certainly helped. 412 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Also a rushing touchdown as well, nearly 37 points for him. Jonathan Taylor, a big day, which, look, I know some of you might have been eliminated when he dropped the football a couple weeks ago. But, for those of you who survived, 125 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, 27.6 points there. T. Higgins, who ate over the weekend, 11 catches, 131 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. Trey McBride, 12 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown. We may dive into that a little bit later in the show. 30.3 points for McBride. Cameron Dicker the kicker, 4 field goals, 4 PATs, 16 points there. And the Eagles defense taking advantage of Cooper Rush and the Cowboys. A sack, 4 takeaways, a touchdown, 7 points allowed. That's good for 19 fantasy points. So those are the overall fantasy heroes. Who was your personal fantasy hero this week, Laquan?
Dun 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 dun! Another superhero of an alpha stature, and like I tried to do this comparison with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase because they have two wide receiver ones on the Bengals offense, and I came down to the conclusion that Iron Man and Captain America. You figure out who's whoever, but T. Higgins putting up a 40 burger in the second time in his career, and honestly, him and Jamar Chase, man, they need to stick together. Like if T. Higgins goes anywhere else next season, I'm going to be completely off. Like it's clear in stone that the Bengals are dangerous with two wide receiver ones. This is a formula that not all teams have. So honestly, him bringing home the championship for a lot of fantasy managers, putting up 40 points, people. This is the second time in his career he's done that. And honestly, just looking at the frame and body work that he has had, you do not want to lose this type of talent, and he is bringing it home for a lot of fantasy managers, or he ended some stories of the championship for a lot of fantasy managers this weekend.
Well, I mean, so a couple things about that. One, the Bengals do have some really tough decisions to make about who to pay and whether or not they can afford all three of those pieces. The other part is you have to figure out who Andre Yoshivas hangs out with, because then he would be the Bucky Barnes to that person's Captain America. And then you can figure out, which one is which. So, once we figure out who Yoshivas is eating lunch with, then we know who Captain America is versus who is Iron Man. There.
Who gets paid? That's what it's going to be. Iron Man.
Yeah, I mean, really,
Iron Man all the way, by the way.
Who's going to get paid for sure? Florida, who is your particular Marvel hero for the weekend?
It's Baker Mayfield, who I don't know which Marvel hero he is, but I do know that if he knew one of his boys' parents were murdered, he wouldn't cover it up. Captain America was wrong all the way. It's Baker Mayfield, though, who joined Jared Goff as the only quarterback this year with a game with at least 350 yards, 5 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Only the GOAT, Tom Brady, has had more multiple passing touchdowns in a season in Bucs history than Baker has right now. I know Joe Burrow went out and put up monstrous numbers, and everyone who played him probably thought their day was over. But if you had Baker Mayfield, he pretty much went step for step with that and finished like a point or two behind him. So I think Baker and Mike Evans won a lot. And then you throw in Jalen McMillan there as well. Like I think the whole Bucs team, Bucky Irving, all of them won a lot of people championships this week.
Yeah, big Hawkeye vibes from Baker Mayfield, right? Like he's, nobody really gets excited about him, but he comes through when you need him to, and he's not afraid to let it fly, sort of like Clint
He's
Barton
literally
is.
the best NFC quarterback right now in passing yards, touchdowns, completion percentage. Like he is the best NFC quarterback right now. So shout out to Hawkeye.
The Browns could use a guy like that. Just putting that out there. So I guess if we're going with the theme, I guess that makes Malik Neighbors Spider-Man, right? Because he was my guy for this weekend. The young kid from New York, going out there making plays sometimes when it seems like all is lost. And I know there were questions about, would he play? How much would he play? But he went out, had 171 receiving yards and a pair of touchdowns in a game that I think Giants fans would have maybe preferred that they didn't win. But hey, man, shout out to Malik Neighbors for going out and really putting together what was a fantastic season despite some hideous quarterback play for long stretches there in New York. I was going to say it feels like Odell Beckham vibes, but at least Odell had Eli Manning, right? I mean, he had a guy that, you can argue whether or not he belongs in the Hall of Fame, but the fact is Eli's at least in the argument. You can't say the same for Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito or any of the guys that were throwing footballs in New York this season. Nonetheless, Malik Neighbors sitting on over 1,100 yards, 104 catches, and the 6 touchdowns this year, continues to be a stud. Florida, I know you were on the Malik Neighbors train from before the season even started. And while there were some parts of the season that were a little bit of a slog, overall turns out to be a very good year for him, and he's going to be very much in the conversation. I would say probably a second-round pick. Is that fair for Malik Neighbors next year? Second round?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think if if they brought in a proven quarterback, I could make an argument for him as first-round pick.
Yeah. The question is, can they get that quarterback, especially if they screwed up their draft position?
In the last 5 years, there's been 3 receivers to have 100 rookies, 150 or more yards, 2 or more touchdowns in a game. It's Jefferson, Chase, and Neighbors, which one elite, 2 wide receivers go to LSU.
Yeah, apparently. That's apparently the story there. All right, so those are our individual fantasy heroes. Now our big takeaways from week 17. LQ, what did you learn?
Yo, Amir Abdullah is good at football. I mean, honestly, he has earned his role in that Raiders backfield next year. Like, have we not been seeing him not fit the bill as a league winner? The criteria is literally him. The last 3 weeks, 19 fantasy points per game. And being a guy that can get involved in the passing game, like, how many receiving touchdowns this guy's going to catch next year? Like, hopefully he's in that backfield next year and he's going to make his way to my fantasy rosters, and he should definitely be on the radar because I think a lot of people in this offseason, they're going to forget he exists. And then he's going to do the same thing again if he's put in the right position.
That all sounds absolutely wonderful. I have no confidence that the Raiders will do that this offseason. None.
Thanks,
None
MG.
whatsoever. No, I mean, I just really don't. I mean, we're talking about it. Look, as great as Amir Abdullah was for them down this stretch, we're talking about a running back that's going to be 32 next season, going on his 10th season in the NFL. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. Like, I just don't see the Raiders spending the money to bring him back.
He ain't got to be the RB1. He could eat as the backseat again. I mean, I'm just saying. He's going to be on my roster next year.
It's all fun.
I will dye my hair. No, I'm lying.
Yeah. I wouldn't. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. We're all going to be watching Zamir White try to take over the RB1.
Some silver to go with the black there.
Oh,
and just
no.
look like the Raiders.
No.
Florio, what is your takeaway from the week?
This rookie class is an all-time great rookie class. Like, look, we've already talked about Brock Bowers, arguably the best rookie tight end ever. We just talked up Malik Neighbors. There's also Brian Thomas Jr. They're both top 6 wide receivers in fantasy this season. There's Jaden Daniels, who is a lock to win rookie of the year. There's Bucky Irving getting the job done at running back. And then there's deeper players like Marvin Harrison Jr., Ladd McConkey, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman. And I think it's two things. One, don't expect next year's rookie class to be like this. But two, I think it drives forward a point that we've discussed on the show in the past a lot. But rookies are ready to come in and make an immediate impact now. So don't don't push them up your board next year just because of what this class did. But also don't shy away from taking them just because they're rookies, because they come in now more NFL ready than ever before.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, the way the college game works and the way that NFL offenses are sort of catering to the young players, it makes a lot more sense that these guys are ready to go right now. Meanwhile, tight end, maybe not quite so ready to go right now. I think this was the year, not that we said the tight end was deep, but it felt like it was deeper than it had been in past years, and turned out not really. We had maybe 5.5 guys that we could really count on a weekly basis. I mean, you had your guys at the top with Bowers and McBride. Kittle has been great. Jonnu Smith, who's a completely different story because no one except one person that we know who will remain unnamed actually believed in Jonnu Smith this year. Beyond that, I mean, when you looked on a weekly basis, it went from startable to streaming in a real big hurry. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you are drafting next year. It might be the reason that we see guys like Brock Bowers and Trey McBride pushed up maybe above where they should be going in drafts, because once you get to a certain point, it's going to be hard to find guys you can count on a consistent basis. The Tucker Crafts, the Pat Fryermuths, the Hunter Henrys of the world, not very exciting. So it may be a little bit of a race to get to the guys in the elite levels just to know you have that position locked up on a week-to-week basis in fantasy. But we should still keep it. Do not take this as an argument saying we need to get rid of tight ends, because I know that's floating around there in the fantasy sphere. We're not doing that.
I hate it.
Just because you can't predict them doesn't mean we shouldn't have them. That's it.
Just like people get hurt in week 17 and let's cut the season short. Stop making it easier.
Stop doing this. Stop it. We're going to take a quick break, come back. We're going to dive into our waiver wire pickup of the year and moments we love. That's coming up next on the NFL Fantasy Football Show. Time for Waiver Wire, presented by YouTube TV. Obviously, not as many guys that you're going to be chasing. So instead, we decided to do the pickup of the year candidates. Who are they, Florio?
At quarterback, we got Sam Darnold, who I think should get some MVP love this year. We got Bo Nix, who probably is going to finish top 3 in rookie of the year. And then Justin Herbert, who has led the Chargers to the playoffs, all 3 of which have come through in different times in fantasy this season. At running back, I love Bucky Irving and what he's done, but there's also J.K. Dobbins. We all thought it would be Vidal or Gus Edwards. Rico Dowdle, Tyrone Tracy, and Amir Abdullah all hit at different times this year. Pass catchers, Juwan Jennings, What he did in the middle of the season was awesome. Darnell Mooney really has been a viable wide receiver 3, at times even better than that. Jerry Jeudy for a stretch of the season with Jameis Winston was a top 2 wide receiver in fantasy. And then Adam Thielen and Jalen McMillan, late season bloomers, but players who have helped win people championships. Jonnu Smith is obviously the waiver wire tight end of the year, but I wanted to give love to Taysom Hill, who had a really hot stretch before he got hurt, and Tucker Kraft and Hunter Henry. Not the biggest league winners or anything like that, but usable, viable tight ends at a weak position.
All right. A good list there. So, Laquan, for you, who is your waiver wire pickup of the year?
It has to be Bo Nix, because thinking about the questions that we had going into this offseason, how is Sean Payton and him in this relationship going to work? And then even those first couple of weeks, we're kind of like, is Bo Nix a fantasy asset? I don't know yet. But once he had his argument with Sean Payton, like, Dad, get off my back, I got this. He went out there and put up huge QB1 numbers. Like, his highs are in the 30s. Like, this is what you want out of a quarterback you're picking off the waiver wire, especially if you were bullish on Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, or whatever reason you went out there for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, the Trevor Lawrence hate train will continue, ladies and gentlemen. Hey. But he definitely gets the Bo Nix, gets waiver wire of the year, man.
All right. Florio, who's your guy?
I really wanted Laquan to go with Jonnu Smith. I'm going with Bucky Irving here, who is a top 15 fantasy running back on this season. And I know some of you might be like, well, he was drafted in my league, but he didn't start early on, so he was probably thrown back on the waiver wire, even if he was drafted. And this, I've talked about it a lot, wasn't the best year for zero RBs. Like, there was pockets where Rico Dowdle was really useful, or Amir Abdullah was really useful, or Tyrone Tracy, but there wasn't like I got this guy and he was like a league winner type pickup at the running back position outside of Bucky Irving, I would argue, who just continued to be uber consistent down the stretch, put up some big games in the fantasy playoffs. So to me, the champion of the zero RB strategy this year was Bucky Irving. And I think he won a lot of people championships this year.
So mine is going to be Sam Darnold, and for some of the reasons that Laquan talked about, because if you went maybe with a different quarterback and you were trying to sort of make things work, you were probably frustrated, right? I mean, we all kind of had our Anthony Richardson frustrations. Look, we stayed away from certain Vikings because we didn't think Sam Darnold could get it done, right? We knocked down Justin Jefferson in our fantasy draft rankings because we were worried about Sam Darnold. Instead, he's the QB7 going into Monday night, right? He's got 300 fantasy points, had a huge game on Sunday in a big spot for the Minnesota Vikings there against the Packers. Almost 400 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. He's been great pretty much all year long. And, you know, who could use a guy like him? The Jets. They could use a quarterback like Sam Darnold. I'm just putting that out there. But he's been fantastic to the point that now the Vikings really do have a decision whether they keep him around, what they do with J.J. McCarthy. He might have delayed McCarthy's development at least one more year with the way he has played. So there you go. Those are our waiver wire pickups of the year. There it is, man. There it is. Real quick, got a Jonnu Smith update. It was not the greatest game for Jonnu Smith, but it was good enough. Another late touchdown for Jonnu. Ends up with 11.6 fantasy points, 3 catches, 26 yards and a touchdown. Not even Tyler Huntley could prevent him from scoring double-digit fantasy points. And right now, overall, he is the tight end 4. He's about 30 points clear of tight end 6. So it feels like this is a wrap, barring something miraculous happening in week 18. So we're at the set up the time for the dyeing of the hair. We will set that up. So that is going to be a moment that we really do love. But now it is time for moments that we love, presented by Barefoot Wines. We've touched a little bit on Trey McBride on this show, but a moment that we all love across fantasy, even though it happened at the expense of Laquan's Rams. You guys won the game. It doesn't matter. He scored his first receiving touchdown of the season. One of the 12 catches he had in that game at SoFi Stadium on Saturday night. But guys, we've been waiting for this all year long. We have to be thrilled. His only other touchdown was a fumble recovery in the end zone. So finally, our precious Trey McBride finds the end zone. We can all get behind that, right? Even Rams fans can get behind that for fantasy.
Absolutely not, man. This game was stressful, and him scoring like literally almost had me rip my hair out. Like, I didn't want that to happen. Who voted for this?
Trey McBride was my guy coming in at tight end coming into the year, and if he had a couple of more touchdowns, he finishes as the tight end 1. So I'm still salty that they couldn't get him the ball, but I let out an audible cheer when he did finally score this past week. I was so happy to see it happen because he's good. He did 104 catches, 1 touchdown. Like, that's more on Kyler than on him, I would say.
It's absolutely more on Kyler than it is on Trey McBride for sure, because he's done everything else for this team this season that you could imagine. So there you go. That's a moment we love, presented by Barefoot Wine. Meanwhile, for us, that is it. We are done. We appreciate you hanging out with the NFL Fantasy Football Show. You know the drill. Tell 2 friends to tell 2 friends. Rate, review, and remember, in order to be more healthy, eat all the junk food in your house so it won't tempt you anymore. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. Have a happy new year, everybody. And we will talk to you again real soon.